Jacob's ladder block, and it finishes at 9 inches. And you can see the ladder here going up. That's probably why it's called Jacob's ladder. And it's made of 5 4-patch units. There's one in each corner and one in the center, and then 4 half-square triangle units. This is a great block for beginners because you just have the 2 units, and you can switch it around a lot. You can change the colors in it. We're going to do 2 color blocks where I have the background, all the same fabric, and then each accent fabric in each block will be the same. You can change it out and make the half square triangles different colors. You can make different colors in the 4 patches, and however you want. Just play around with the colors and the placement of the colors. Here are the instructions for this quilt. You can download these in the description below the video. And the quilt finishes at 63 inches by 81 inches. And on the front cover, it's going to be hard to see, but I have 3 different layout versions. And this has 63 blocks. They're set 7 across and 9 down. And the version you saw in the pictures is this one here. The accent fabric, you're going to need 16 fat quarters. Now the background fabric, you can easily make the background fabric scrappy, and you can make it low volume prints, white tone on tone, light tone on tone, any light color fabric. Just make sure you have a good contrast in the fabric, the background and the accent fabric. You'll need 16 fat quarters for the background. And if you want to buy yardage, you'll need 4 yards, and we're going to cut the 4 yards of background fabric into fat quarters because it's just going to be easier to cut and faster to cut. And in the instructions and in this video, I'm going to show you the rotary cutting method of cutting and of sewing together the half square triangles, and also the AccuQuilt cutting method, how to cut them and how to piece them together. The half square triangles are made for rotary cutting. They're made 8 at a time, so we're going to cut squares. And for the AccuQuilt cutting, you're going to go ahead and just cut the triangles and then sew them together. And then on the last page, the 4 patches are going to be made the same no matter which type of cutting you use. So we'll do that next. And then you assemble the blocks into a quilt top. We're going to start with the rotary cutting method, but for either cutting method, you're going to start with your fat quarters, and I like to press them out really well, and you're going to put them, these are right sides together, and then I've matched the selvages here. Since I don't have the room for the camera, I'm going to fold this in half like this. And so this here is the 22 inches, and this is the 18 inches. If you look on page 2, this little diagram here tells you the pieces you're going to cut. And there's 6 pieces total. And so this would be facing this way, because here's the 18 inches and here's the 18 inches. So we'll just kind of put that up there. Now, if you wanted to, you can stack several different pairs, but always make sure the light and the dark are stacked right sides together, because that's going to help you later. After we cut everything up, then the pieces are already right sides together and you just pick them up and sew them. So we're just going to use 1 pair right here, a light and a dark. And this is the rotary cutting section. So if you're not interested in the rotary cutting section, look at the timeline just at the bottom of the video, and it'll be the next little space, and if you click on that, it'll go directly to the AccuQuilt cutting method, and you can skip this part altogether. So let's go on with the rotary cutting. I'm going to look here on this cutting chart, and I've got it oriented the same way. We're going to cut 4 strips at 2 inches times 21 inches. And then we're going to cut 2 squares at 7 3/4 inches. These are for the 4 patch units, and the squares are for the 8 at a time half square triangles. If you have a longer ruler and you can lay your fat quarter out without folding it in half, then you're going to get more accurate cuts, but I'm going to do that this way here. I'm going to move this over just a little. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut my 2" by 21 inches. I don't like to pick up my ruler after each cut. I need 2 inches, so I can get, this is a 6.5 inch ruler, so I can get 3 cuts from this one ruler without picking it up, and I'll show you. So I've lined up the cut edge with the 6 inch mark, so I have 6 inches of fabric underneath the ruler, and I'm going to make 1 cut. Then I'm going to move the ruler over, and all you have to do is just slide it over like this, because these rulers only stick if you press on them, put pressure on them. So I'm going to slide it over to the 4 inch mark on this edge. Make sure it's nice and even, and then make another cut. So this is my first 2 inch cut. Then I'm going to go to 2 inches and cut again. Oops. So now I have 3 of my 4 cuts. I'm going to put these up here. Then I'll cut 1 more at 2 inches. And put that with the others. Now I need my 7 3/4 inch squares. So I'm going to move this over to the 0 mark. And I'm going to find 7 3/4 on my mat and put the ruler on that. And then I'm going to cut. So here is the only part, most of the only part that is waste or scrap. Since I folded it, I have 4 layers here. So I'm going to cut off this part over here and even up the edge. Flip it back over and cut 7 3/4 again. And then we have some more scrap here. So there's our scrap. Next, what you're going to do for rotary cutting, we're going to stitch the half square triangles. So I'm going to open this up, and now I have 2 sets of triangles that I need, and they're both right sides together. And on the light side of the light square, I'm going to draw a line across the diagonal both times, across both diagonals. And one here. You're going to do that with the other one too. Now what I'm going to do is stitch on both sides of each of these diagonal lines a 1/4 inch away. So you're going to stitch 2 this way and 2 this way. And then I'll come back and show you what you'll do with them. So here you can see I've stitched on either side of both of the diagonal lines, and I used a darker thread so you can see. And the first one, these are the, you get 8 half square triangles, and this is designed to cut exactly the size you need. So these measure right now at 3.5 inches. If you think that you won't be able to get accuracy like that, or you might have a problem, then cut your squares at 8 inches, and then you'll have to trim down every one of them. I suggest you try it on some scrap fabric before you cut up all your other fabric. So trim off these little nubs here, right here and right here. So I'm going to show you how to cut it. You're going to cut on each diagonal line, but before that you're going to cut horizontal and vertically, and I like to do the horizontal and verticals first. And what I do is I line up these edges on one of the ruler markers here and here. Then I slide it to this point right here, and you give a little, make sure you can see the intersection right there, because when you cut it, it's going to have a little bit of a thickness on the side here. So let's cut this. And then leave it in place. Just pick up your ruler, and then we'll put it on this side. Match these edges over here with one of the ruler lines, as well as on the other side over here. And find your center and then cut. Now once that's done, you could pull them apart right now if you want to, or you can just leave them where they are. You want to try to stitch right on that diagonal line you marked, and then cut across this diagonal line as well. Alright, let's see if I cut them. Then you pull these apart and you have your 8 half square triangles. Then you will press these toward the dark side, the accent fabric, and then cut off the nubs. So from each fat quarter set, you will get 16 half square triangles, and that's enough to make 4 blocks. So now you can move on to piecing the 4 patches. If you want to skip the AccuQuilt cutting part, just click on the timeline below the next little section and it'll jump right to piecing the 4 patch unit. We're still on page 2 and we're moving on to the AccuQuilt Cutting, and there's a little chart here. The choice of, you have 2 different choices for dies. There's one die that will cut 2 triangles on one swoop, and these come in the 6-inch cube or the 12-inch cube, and then this die will cut 4. So you can cut 6 layers of each. So with this one you can get 12 at a time, and with this one you can get 24 at a time. So I use this one because it was faster, but the cutting instructions will work for both of them, and I'll show you a little bit how it's different as we go along. You're going to start the same way with your fat quarters, with your right sides together, and I'm folding mine in half because so you can see it, but you can cut yours flat. You don't have to worry so much about trimming off the edges because you're using the AccuQuilt and those will be trimmed off. Just make sure when you measure that you have enough fabric that you really want. So this one, again, I'm going to turn it this way. We're first going to cut off a big chunk over here for our strips. So you can use your 2-inch strip cutter. If you don't have the 2-inch strip cutter, cut the strips the 2 inches by 21 inches by rotary cutter, the same way we did in the rotary cutting section. But here we're going to first cut off 8.5 inches by the 21 inches. So I'm going to put it on the 0 line and a little bit over to make sure I have enough fabric. Then I'm going to cut 8.5 inches. Now this piece, and you can layer 6 layers, but be sure that you have the light and the dark with right sides together for your 6 layers. So you open this up, here's my selvage over here. You're going to lay this on the strip cutter and then you'll cut your 4 strips all at once and just leave them whatever length they are. So that's that part. Next we're going to cut this in half. This should be about 9.5 inches. So it's about 9 inches. So we're going to cut it in half, and it's going to be 4.5 inches. And luckily you don't have to be quite exact with this. Now we're going to open these up, and I'm going to cut the selvage off and stack these, or stack these first, then cut the selvage off. So I have 4 layers right now, and I'm going to cut the selvage off first. And then I'm going to cut 9 inches, and then another 9 inches. So we cut it 9 inches and 18 inches. And then here's our scrap. And what you're going to do with these, if you're using this triangle where it cuts 4, you can place these 6 on here and then cut out your triangles, your 24 triangles. Of course, in my case, I only have 4 pieces. Now for this size, you'll want to cut these in half. So this will be 4.5 by 4.5. And then you can put these on here and cut out all your triangles. Now I just cut these triangles. Take off this excess. And since you put the right sides together, you have the triangles already put together. So you just take the two, or the pieces together, and then stitch your 1/4 of an inch and sew all your triangles together like that. And here are two of the triangles that I cut, the half square triangles that I cut with the AccuQuilt. And since we cut it with the AccuQuilt, there are no nubs to cut off, to trim off. And you're going to press these toward the dark fabric, just like you did with the rotary cutting. So now we'll move on to the 4-patch units. Whether you cut with the rotary cutter or with the AccuQuilt, you should have, for each fabric, each accent fabric, 4 strip sets, and they should be placed right sides together if you cut them that way. So you're going to take all of these, there'll be 4 of them, and you're going to sew them together along the long side. Here I used a darker color thread. Then you're going to press these toward the dark fabric, like this. So here are 2 that I've sewn and pressed toward the dark fabric. Now I'm going to show you how to take 2 of these strip sets and turn them into 10 4-patches. So here are the strip sets pressed and ready to go. What you're going to do is take one strip set, flip it over, and put it on top of the other. And if you pressed both things toward the dark fabric, you'll be able to nest or interlock these seams. And you can feel with your fingers, because if it's nice and flat, if it's got a lump in it, it's not nested. If you can't feel any lumps along the way, then it's nicely nested. So what you're going to do is, we're now going to cut these pieces. And if you see here, you have a 4-patch right there. So we're going to subcut these pieces into 10 pieces. And then we're going to sew those together to make the 4-patch units. Now I want to show you how I cut all of the 10 pieces without lifting my ruler up off the mat. You're going to place it on the mat and place it so you can see the lettering, the numbers at the bottom, and you can see the lines that are on the numbers, the vertical lines on the numbers. And make sure that you have the selvage part is over the 0 line, because you're going to trim it off at the 0 line. And make sure everything's interlocked and flat and even across this line. And make sure you have 20 inches of usable fabric. So here's my 20-inch mark here, so I have plenty of fabric even though I have the selvage over here. So just to make sure, I'm going to move it over this way some more, just to make sure. So now between my 0 mark over here and my 20 mark over here, I don't have any selvages and any wonky ends. So we're good to go. Now how I do that, I take this ruler, and this is a 12.5-inch ruler. I turn it so I have a full inch mark on the right-hand side. I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, do it the opposite way. And I'm going to work from the right side to the left side. Now if you're uncomfortable or don't understand this, you cut it the way you are comfortable cutting. You can try this on something else, some scrap piece of fabric, but I think once you try it and you get it, you'll really like it. So my first cut has to be on the 20-inch mark, because I want to cut 10 pieces at 2 inches. So that's 10 times 2 is 20. So I put my ruler down, and you can see that I can move this ruler with just my 2 fingers. It slides easily. And if I put my hand down, it doesn't slide, because the ruler was made that way. You don't want it to slide when you're cutting, but you want it to be able to slide to position the ruler correctly. I'm going to position my ruler so this edge is on the 20-inch line. But I want to make sure that it's not this way, wacky this way. So I hold my finger on this side, because I know it's on the 20-inch line. And if you look, if you do this with your other finger, you can pivot that ruler. So then I'm going to look at the top part and pivot it and make sure that the top part is on the 20-inch line. Okay? And once that happens, then you put your hand on the ruler, put pressure on it, and then cut. Now you're not going to pick up anything. So you're going to slide it down till the end of the ruler is on the 18-inch line. And then you're going to pivot it to make sure it's on the 18-inch line up here. And then you're going to cut. And now I'm going to go all the way down doing the same thing. This next one's 16. And then the last thing you do is trim off at the 0 mark. Now you can pick up your ruler. Now don't pick up any pieces just yet. Just take off the pieces on the end that you cut off. And now you should have your 10 segments just laying there. But they're all put together, and I'll just pick one up to show you. They're all put together, so all you have to do is sew down the long line. So I'll put this back. And you want to be able to just grab a set and sew, grab and sew, and just chain piece. So I'm going to start from the ends and pick this up. And then I'm going to stagger it. See, this is down a little bit lower than this one. Pick both of these up and stagger it up. Pick everything up, stagger it down and up, and then put these on top of each other. So here's a close-up, and you can see all I'll do is just pick this up when I'm sewing and pick this up and sew it. Make, straighten it out a little bit. Then the next one, pick it up and sew it. So it goes much faster this way. Now I've sewed 5 of my 4-patch units together, and I pressed to one side. And you can press open if you like. So now to construct the block, you take 5 of these 4-patch units, and they're all going to be oriented this way with the dark fabric in the upper left corner. Then we take 4 of our half square triangles and we lay them like this. And this is how the block goes together. You sew the units into rows, 3 rows, then you sew the 3 rows together. The next thing, the final thing we do once all the blocks are finished is you choose a design you like or make one up of your own, and then lay the blocks out in 7 across and 9 down. So sew your rows of 7, and you'll have 9 of those. Then sew those rows together and your quilt is finished. I'd like to start something new called Subscriber Show and Tell. If you make this quilt and you want to send a picture in, there's an email at the end of this pattern, and you can email me a picture. And every so often, I don't know how often I'll do it, it depends on how many pictures I get, I'd like to do a subscriber show and tell, and show your pictures of your completed project and how you did it different. And if you could send me a few words about your experience with it, what you did, why you chose this or that. I'd love to hear from you about your project, and I'd love to be able to share it with other people. So thank you for watching, and send me a picture of your projects.